Hello, welcome to the Bible Odyssey. I'm so glad you're here. Come and settle in with me. The night is here, the world is quiet, and this space is just for you. Tonight, I want to tell you a story about a window. A simple upstairs window in Babylon that faced toward Jerusalem. Every single day, morning, noon, and evening, Daniel would open that window, kneel down, and pray. He had done it for decades, long before praying became dangerous. And on the day the new law was signed, the one that carried the penalty of the lion's den, Daniel did exactly what he had always done. He went home, walked up the stairs, opened the window, and prayed. It wasn't loud defiance, it was quiet faithfulness. The window could not be closed by any decree, because it wasn't just a window, it was the rhythm of Daniel's heart. And then there was the king. Darius, the most powerful man in the empire, lay awake all night in his palace, restless, tormented, unable to eat or find comfort. While Daniel slept peacefully in the lion's den, kept safe by the angel God had sent, the king could not close his eyes. Two men awake in the dark, until one of them wasn't. Close your eyes now. Let me tell you the rest of the story, about the window that no law could shut, about the man who prayed while lions breathed softly around him, about the king who loved him, and about the faithful God who shows up in the darkest places and brings morning. Daniel, chapter 6, verses 1 through 23. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God." So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "Issue a royal decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den." So King Darius put the decree in writing. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went to the king and said, "Remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed." So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Daniel had been in Babylon a long time. He was one of the young men taken in the first deportation from Jerusalem, the Babylonian invasion that stripped the city of its best and brightest, the deliberate imperial strategy of removing the gifted young people of the conquered nation and placing them in the capital where their gifts could serve the empire. Daniel was taken as a teenager. He was given a Babylonian name, Belteshazzar, and placed in a training program designed to produce loyal administrators for the empire. He was to learn the language and the literature of the Babylonians. He was to eat from the king's table. He was to be formed into the kind of person Babylon needed. He remained the person Jerusalem had formed him to be. This is the detail that sets up everything that follows. From the first chapter of the book, when Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, the whole of his life in Babylon was the life of the person who had decided, long before any particular test arrived, who he was and what he would and would not do. The decisions had already been made. The character had already been formed. What Babylon provided was not the formation of Daniel. It provided the circumstances in which the formation that had already happened became visible. He had served 3 empires: Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, Belshazzar his son, and now Darius the Mede, who had conquered the Babylonians and reorganized the empire, and who had seen in Daniel what every ruler before him had seen: exceptional qualities, trustworthy, neither corrupt nor negligent, the kind of person who does the right thing not because someone is watching, but because doing the right thing is who they are, the kind of person whose character is the same in private as in public, whose word means what it says, who has served empires that have come and gone without the service compromising the person doing the serving. The king planned to set him over the whole kingdom, and this is what made the trap possible. The administrators and the satraps tried to find something wrong with him. They investigated his conduct of government affairs. They looked for the corruption, the negligence, the conflict of interest, the compromised judgment that could be used against him. They found nothing. Not because they did not look closely. They looked as closely as men with motive look, because there was nothing to find. We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God. The only vulnerability in Daniel's life was his faithfulness. The thing most deeply who he was, the prayer, the open window, the 3 times a day kneeling toward Jerusalem, was the only place where his life could be used against him. His work was beyond attack. His character was beyond attack. The only available target was the practice that was the ground of everything else. The prayer, that made him who he was. So they built a law around it. 30 days. No prayer to any god or human being except the king. The trap dressed as a royal honor. And Darius, who did not see what was happening, signed it. The trap was set, and Daniel went home. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Just as he had done before. These are the most important words in the story. Not, Daniel prayed in defiance of the decree. Not, Daniel prayed despite the consequences. Not, Daniel made a courageous theological stand against the authority of the state. The text simply says, just as he had done before. The decree arrived. Daniel went home. He opened the window. He got down on his knees. He prayed and gave thanks. The same thing he had been doing every day for decades. The same window, the same direction, the same God, just as he had always done. The window was not the response to the decree. The window was who Daniel was. This is the most important distinction in the story, and the one most easily missed. The prayer at the open window was not a courageous act performed in the face of danger. It was the ordinary, daily, completely unremarkable practice of a man whose faithfulness had become the texture of his life rather than a decision he made each day. He did not decide to pray. He prayed. The way a person breathes, the way a person wakes in the morning and puts their feet on the floor. The practice had been formed across so many years of the doing that the doing had become who he was. Think about what that took. Not on the day of the decree, on the thousands of ordinary days before the decree. The morning prayer when he was tired, and the morning was demanding, and the prayer was not the easiest thing to do before the day began. The noon prayer in the middle of administrative work, setting down the affairs of the empire to get down on his knees in his upstairs room and turn his face toward Jerusalem. The evening prayer at the end of the long day of the service of foreign kings. 3 times a day, every day, for decades. Not because the praying was always easy or vivid or produced the feeling of the divine presence, because he was the person who prayed 3 times a day and gave thanks to his God. The practice was not something he did, it was something he was. And this is what the decree could not touch. A decree can prohibit an action. It cannot change a person. It cannot reach the place where the practice has become the identity, where the prayer is not the thing Daniel does, but the thing Daniel is. The administrators thought they were targeting his religion. They were targeting his person. And the person was not available to be targeted by a 30-day law, because the person had been formed across thousands of days of the ordinary practice, and the formation that takes thousands of days to accomplish cannot be undone by 30. He opened the window, the same window it had always been, facing Jerusalem, just as he had done before. And then he got down on his knees and prayed and gave thanks, in full view of the city of Babylon, in full knowledge of what was coming, with the specific, settled, completely unperformative calm of a man who had already made every decision that mattered years before the decree arrived. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him. And he could not sleep. The most powerful man in the world could not sleep. Darius had signed the decree. He had seen the trap, too late by sundown, when the men came to collect the consequence, and the law of the Medes and Persians could not be changed by anyone, not even the king who made it. He had made every effort to save Daniel and found no legal way to do it. He had said, as Daniel was lowered into the den, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." And then he went home, and could not eat, and could not be entertained, and could not sleep. The vigil of the person who loves someone in a dangerous place and cannot reach them. The specific, long, completely private anguish of the night kept for another person. The night when the thoughts keep returning to the den, to the stone rolled over the mouth, to the person inside the darkness that the king cannot enter. The most powerful man in the ancient world had all the power available to power, and none of it was sufficient to open the den from the outside. He could only wait and watch and not sleep. This is the second story inside the Daniel story, and it belongs to far more people than Daniel's story does. The person who is in the den is the person who needs the courage and the faithfulness and the open window. But the person keeping the vigil for the person in the den, the Darius person, the one lying awake in the palace while the one they love is in the darkness, that person needs something different. Not the theology of the open window, the theology of the sleepless night. And the sleepless night has its own theology. The keeping of the vigil is itself a form of faithfulness. The refusing to sleep, the staying awake for the person in the den, is the love expressing itself in the only way available when the stone is rolled and the den is sealed. Darius could not help Daniel. He could stay awake for Daniel. And he did, the whole long night, without eating, without distraction, just awake, for the man in the den. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. Hurried. The most powerful man in the ancient world hurried to the den at the first light of dawn because he had been awake all night for the man inside it. And he called out, "Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God been able to rescue you from the lions?" And the voice came back, out of the darkness, from inside the den, "My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me." The king was overjoyed, and Daniel was lifted out. And no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. My God sent his angel and shut the mouths of the lions. We are not told when the angel was sent. The text does not say, at midnight, when Daniel was most afraid, God sent an angel to comfort him. It does not say, when the lions approached, God sent an angel to hold them back. It simply says, after the night is over, in Daniel's own account of what happened, my God sent his angel and shut the mouths of the lions. The angel was there from the beginning, before the stone was rolled over the mouth, before the king sealed it with his ring, before the long dark night of the den began. The angel was already sent. The protection preceded the danger. The mouths were shut before Daniel had to find out whether the mouths would be shut. And this changes the quality of what Daniel was doing in the den. He was not surviving. He was not enduring. He was not gritting his teeth through the night in the specific, effortful, exhausting way of the person who is holding it together through sheer force of will. The lions were quiet. The angel was present. And Daniel, who had opened the window and prayed and given thanks 3 times a day for decades, was in the den with the same God he had always been in every room with. The den was different from the upstairs room, and the God in the den was the same as the God in the upstairs room. I believe Daniel slept in the den, not because the text says so, it does not say so, because everything we know about Daniel says that the person who could kneel at an open window and give thanks to his God 3 times a day while the decree was being prepared and the trap was being set is the person who could lay down in the presence of the angel and the quiet lions and sleep. The trust that produced the open window produced the sleep in the den. The same settled, unperformative, "this is who I am" faithfulness. The king was awake in the palace. Daniel was asleep in the den. The most powerful man in the world could not sleep because of his fear for Daniel. Daniel slept because of his trust in God. This is the theological center of the story, and it is the center that speaks most directly to the person lying awake tonight. The peace that Daniel had in the den was not the peace of the safe situation. It was the peace of the trusted God. The same peace that Jesus had in the stern of the boat in the storm. The peace that does not require the resolution of the circumstances before it is available. The peace of the person who has placed the outcome in the right hands and who can therefore rest while the stone is still over the mouth. Before we meet the people in the everyday parallel, I want to give you 3 things you can take into tomorrow. The Daniel story is not only a story about faith under pressure, it is a story about the relationship between who we are and what we do, about the practice that forms the person and the person who sustains the practice under pressure. The psychologists have studied this relationship closely. What they have found maps directly onto what Daniel did at the open window. The first concept is the psychology of identity-based practice. The research on habit formation, the work of James Clear and others on what makes practices sustainable under pressure, distinguishes between outcome-based practices and identity-based practices. An outcome-based practice is one organized around a goal. I pray because I want to maintain my relationship with God. An identity-based practice is one organized around who the person is. I pray because I am a person who prays. The difference sounds small. It is enormous. The outcome-based practice is vulnerable to the cost-benefit calculation. When the cost of the practice rises, when praying at the open window means the lion's den, the person whose practice is outcome-based has a calculation to make. Is the outcome worth the cost? Daniel did not make this calculation. He went home and opened the window just as he had done before, not because he had decided the outcome was worth the cost, because the practice was not attached to an outcome. The practice was who he was, And the person who is the practice does not calculate whether to perform the practice when the cost rises. They simply continue being who they are. The practical application. What practice in your life is identity-based rather than outcome-based? The practice you do not decide to do, you simply do because it is who you are. That practice is your open window, and the decree cannot close it. The second concept is the psychology of the keeping of the vigil. The research on what psychologists call co-rumination, the sustained, anxious, repetitive thinking about a loved one's difficult situation, shows that the vigil can become its own form of suffering when it crosses from the loving attention of the person keeping watch into the anxious spiral of the person who is trying to solve from the outside the problem that can only be resolved from the inside. Darius kept the vigil all night. He did not eat, did not sleep, did not allow entertainment. And at the first light of dawn, he hurried to the den and called out. The vigil was an act of love, the most powerful expression available to the person who cannot be in the den and who will not pretend the den is not happening. But the vigil was not the thing that opened the den. The angel opened the den. The king's vigil was his faithfulness. The angel's presence was God's faithfulness. The practical application for the person keeping the vigil tonight. Your staying awake is not incidental. It is love in action, the only form the love can take when you cannot reach the person in the den. And the keeping of the vigil does not have to resolve into a solution to be meaningful. The vigil is the presence. The presence is the love, and the love is received by the person in the den even when the stone is still over the mouth. The third concept is the psychology of trust and sleep. The research on sleep and anxiety consistently shows that the primary obstacle to sleep is the belief that something needs to be resolved before the rest is permitted. That the problem must be solved, the answer must be found, the outcome must be secured before the lying down is acceptable. The person who cannot sleep is usually the person who has not yet placed the outcome in hands they trust more than their own. Daniel slept in the den because the outcome was in the right hands, not because the outcome was certain. Daniel did not know for certain that the angel would come. He trusted that if the angel came, it would be God's doing. And if the angel did not come, it would also be God's doing. The trust was not in the outcome. The trust was in the one who held the outcome. And the trust that is placed in the one who holds the outcome is the trust that produces sleep. The practical application. What outcome are you holding that belongs in different hands? The thought that is keeping you awake right now, the thing that keeps returning, the problem that needs solving, the person in your den, name it. And then, slowly, place it. In the hands of the one who sent the angel before the stone was rolled. The mouths are being shut. You can rest. The story of Daniel is alive in your life right now. There is a person in the den tonight, not the lion's den, the specific, personal, completely real den of the situation they did not choose and cannot exit. The workplace that has become hostile since the promotion was given to someone else, and the decision was made to work with integrity anyway. The diagnosis that arrived 3 months ago and that has reorganized the calendar around treatment. the relationship that broke in a way that exposed the person to a kind of vulnerability they had not expected to experience at this stage of life. The financial den, the health den, the grief den. This person did not close the window. That is the detail worth attending to. The den did not close the window. The practice of faithfulness, the daily ordinary prayer, the thing that is most deeply who they are. The den has changed the circumstances of the doing. It has not changed the doing. The person in the den is still the person at the window. The prayer is still being prayed. The thanks is still being given, not for the den, in the den. The practice and the person are the same. The den cannot change that. My God sent his angel. The angel was already sent before the stone was rolled. The protection preceded the danger. The mouths are being shut, and the person in the den is not enduring with gritted teeth. They are resting, the way the person rests who has placed the outcome in the right hands. The den is real. The angel is real, and the morning is coming. At the first light of dawn, the voice will call out, and the answer will come back from inside the darkness. They have not hurt me. You are in the den tonight. The mouths are being shut. Rest. And there is a person keeping the vigil tonight. The parent lying awake for the child in the den. The child whose choices are moving in a direction the parent can see and cannot stop. The adult child in the addiction that has reorganized the family's fear for 3 years. The teenager whose mental health has been the family's primary concern for 18 months. The parent cannot be in the den. They cannot reach inside the situation and produce the safety that the love is desperate to produce. They can only wait and watch and not sleep. The spouse lying awake for the partner in the den, the long illness that has been the texture of the marriage for 2 years, the depression that comes in waves and that is in a wave right now. The partner in the den that the person lying awake cannot enter and cannot fix, can only love from the outside through the stone. The friend lying awake for the friend who called at 11 o'clock and said things that made the sleep impossible afterward. The specific, private, long vigil of the person who holds another person's crisis in the small hours when the crisis cannot be resolved and the night has to be gotten through, and the getting through is the only thing available. Darius spent the night without eating and without sleep. And at the first light of dawn, he hurried to the den and called out. You're hurrying to the den at the first light of dawn. You're calling out. You're checking on. You're being the first voice the person in the den hears when the morning comes. That is the love. The vigil produces the running, and the running is received. Daniel heard the king calling. The person in your den hears you calling. The stone does not muffle the voice of the person who kept the vigil. And there is a person who is both tonight, in the den in their own life, and keeping the vigil for someone in a different den. The person managing their own health crisis and lying awake for the child whose situation is also difficult. The person whose faith is in a den, thin, tested, present, but barely, and who is also the person the community relies on to keep the window open for everyone else. The doubled tiredness of the person who is both Daniel and Darius. Both are seen tonight. The window you have kept open, the practice that is still the practice despite the den, is seen, and the vigil you have kept, the sleepless night for the person you love, is seen. Both are faithfulness. Both are the form the love takes in the specific situation you are in. Both are enough, and the angel has been sent for you, for the person in your den, for both. Here is what the story of Daniel in the lion's den does in a life that receives it and keeps returning to it. It forms the identity-based practice. The person who returns to Daniel's window regularly, who brings the current difficulty to the just as he had done before, and holds the two alongside each other, develops across the returning the posture that Daniel had. Not through effort, through accumulation. The practice done repeatedly becomes the practice done naturally. The prayer prayed every morning becomes the prayer that happens before the awareness has fully arrived at the day. The window opened consistently becomes the window that is always open. The continuous, unperformative, "this is who I am" faithfulness that the decree cannot close because it is not a decision that can be reversed. It is a person. The person who wants Daniel's peace in the den needs Daniel's years of practice before the den. The peace in the den is the fruit of the window before the den. The window before the den is formed by the years of the opening, and the years of the opening are available to the person who begins opening the window tonight. Not dramatically, not as the response to the current difficulty, just as they will from now on always do. The character that sustained Daniel through 3 empires and 1 lion's den was not produced overnight. It was formed in the daily, ordinary, completely unremarkable practice of the open window. Morning, noon, night, just as he had always done. The story also forms the trust that the angel is already sent. The person who carries the weight of the outcome, who is lying awake because the situation has not been resolved, because the stone is still over the mouth, because the den has not yet opened, needs the specific theology of the angel sent before the stone was rolled. The protection preceded the danger. The mouths were shut before Daniel had to find out whether they would be shut. The angel was already in the den when the stone was placed over the entrance. The stone has been placed. The angel was already there. The person who returns to this story across the sleepless nights, who brings the person in their den to the angel already sent, finds that the trust slowly forms, not as the confident certainty that the outcome will be what they hope, as the settled knowing that the one who sent the angel before the stone has not been surprised by the stone. The situation is held. The person in the den is known. The mouths are being shut, and the story forms the person who keeps the vigil faithfully. The Darius who kept the night and ran to the den at the first light of dawn, that person is formed by the returning to this story. The vigil is received as faithfulness. The staying awake is received as love. The hurrying to the den at the first light is received as the love expressing itself in the only form available. And the person who keeps the vigil faithfully across the long nights finds that the vigil becomes sustainable in a way it could not be if the vigil were only about the effort of the keeping. The vigil is sustained by the trust that the angel was already sent, and the trust is formed by the returning to the story. At the first light of dawn, just as it always comes. The answer will come back from inside the darkness. They have not hurt me. And now, let everything grow very still. You are in your own room, your own bed, your own dark, and the story has been told. The window was opened just as it had always been opened. The decree could not close the window because the window was not a decision. It was a person. And the angel was sent before the stone was rolled. And Darius kept the vigil all night. And at the first light of dawn, the voice called out over the stone. And the answer came back from inside the darkness. Let the window be opened. Whatever the practice is that is most deeply who you are, the prayer, the daily returning to the word, the quiet morning before the house wakes, the thing you do just as you have always done, let it be the window tonight, not as the courageous act performed in defiance of the difficulty, as the continuity, the same person doing the same thing, regardless of what the circumstances have become. The decree arrived. Daniel opened the window, just as he had done before. The practice is the person, and the person is not available to be changed by a 30-day law. Let the angel be trusted. Before the stone was rolled, the angel was sent. The protection preceded the danger. The mouths were shut before Daniel had to find out whether they would be shut. Whatever stone is over the mouth of whatever den is present in your life tonight, the angel was sent before the stone. The protection is already in place. The outcome is in the right hands. And the hands that hold the outcome are the hands of the one who sent the angel before the crisis arrived. You do not have to hold the outcome tonight. It is held. Rest. Let the vigil be received. If you are keeping the vigil tonight, lying awake for the person in the den, your love expressed in the only form available when you cannot reach inside the situation, the vigil is seen. The staying awake is the faithfulness. The not pretending the den is fine is the love. And at the first light of dawn, you will go to the den and call out, and the voice will come back from inside the darkness, and the answer will come. My God sent his angel. They have not hurt me. The vigil ends at the first light of dawn, and the dawn is coming, and let the rest be permitted. Daniel rested in the den. Not because the den was safe, because the God in the den was the same as the God in the upstairs room. The trust that produced the open window produced the sleep in the den. The outcome was in the right hands. The mouths were shut. The angel was present. And Daniel, the man who prayed 3 times a day and gave thanks to his God, lay down in the den with the lions and rested. The peace that does not require the resolution of the circumstances before it is available. The peace of the trusted God. That peace is in this room tonight, in this den, whatever den it is. You can lay down. The mouths are shut. The angel is here. The morning is coming. Rest. He went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Daniel 6:10. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." Daniel 6:16. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. Daniel 6:18. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me. Daniel 6:22. No wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. Daniel 6:23. Sleep now. The window is open. The angel has been sent. Good night. Rest well.